Hey everyone, I just wanted to give a quick shout out to Haven Cottage Event Center, okay? It is opening in spring. That is right around the corner. And that is a perfect time to host any kind of small to medium-sized occasions. What do you want? Business? Receptions? Art? Whatever it is, just call, send an email, and I bet your event is going to be approved. The phone number and email is all in the description down below. Haven Cottage Event Center. Enjoy the high notes of life the right way.
One more podcast. It is time for another one. One more podcast.
Anyways, something we're gonna pass all the hate on Blake now. We're gonna talk about some serious stuff, some very serious things that actually recently happened. I wouldn't say it recently happened. I think this has been kind of an overall problem for very many years now, reaching back to the Obama administration. And we're going to talk about Syria, everybody. I figured I just heard about this earlier today, and I thought this was kind of, now is the time to talk about it. Let's jump on it. And at this point, I want to discuss... Well, I have an article pulled up about essentially what happened, give you kind of the blanket facts.
Sure.
I do have a little bit of tidbits here and there of who said what and he said, she said, whatever. And then kind of talk about it, because I figured now is very important, because if we don't know what's going on outside of our country, then we are just sheep, and that is no way to live a life. So, before going in, Cole or Evan... do you guys know? Because I know, Blake, we talked about it. I mentioned it, and you said that you were not super aware of what was going on. Cole or Evan, do you have any foreknowledge of what is happening or what I'm about to talk about?
Not of whatever topic we may directly be discussing. I mean, I know that Syria has just generally been a mess of civil war for quite some time, and there's a massive refugee crisis in large parts of the world, particularly Europe. But that's about the extent of my knowledge.
Sure. Okay. So I won't go. I don't necessarily want to go super into the background, because then it's just going to be a history lesson. But really, I think there are a few for those of you listening. There are a few YouTube videos that really go into the specifics and the details, and really kind of outlines what brought us to now. You know, the how there was the birth of ISIS and different dictators and Russian interference and blah 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 and whatever. So if you're not 100% familiar, that's okay. You have the resources available as long as you're willing to learn. That's great. If not, then I hate you, and you shouldn't listen to this podcast. I'm just kidding. Anyways,
Good.
Cool.
Let's drive away, audience.
Yes, let's please.
This nascent stage of our...
I only want 12 people to listen to this, and then once we reach 12, nobody gets to listen to this at all, ever.
Fair enough.
Cole, do you know what I'm referencing specifically, or... Okay, cool. Awesome. All right, so I'll just go ahead and kind of just read the... it's just a couple paragraphs of sort of what happened. So, the White Helmets, a volunteer relief organization that conducts research and rescues and medical evaluations in Syria, said that 40 people died in a chemical attack in the southern city of Douma. If I'm mispronouncing it, I do apologize. The group blamed the Syrian regime. Symptoms of those seeking medical help included bluish skin, foaming of the mouth, burning sensation in the eyes, and difficulty breathing. The UK-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said the death toll was even higher, totaling as many as 80 people, including 40 from suffocation. A statement from the Syrian government said the army, which is advancing rapidly and with determination, does not need to use any kind of chemical agents. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said Monday that no evidence was found of chemical attacks. He also alleged a provocation that has been prepared to blame the regime for an attack. So, obviously, Assad is... I think, honestly, at this point, Assad is behind it. I have no doubt in my mind that this was a Syrian government being tyrannical and trying to either make a statement or do something.
And the U.S. is backing the rebels against Assad, or is it the other way around?
Yeah, because they have... Okay, so I guess if we're going to get into it a little bit...
Well, it's just real quick.
No,
so
sure.
Russia is backing Assad's regime.
Quote-unquote, theoretically.
And if you were to put them in boxing corners,
sure.
Then U.S. and the rebels, and then Assad and his regime and the Russians.
And then whatever the There's another. I know there's another one, another organization. I think the Kurds or something like that. Or I may be totally wrong in terms of who's fighting who in this area. Right. So, but just to state real quick, I think Russia hasn't made any official we're supporting the government, but they haven't done anything to condemn the government for any of its actions. So they're just kind of Putin's just chilling in the corner, just doing its thing. One other thing to add before we jump into it. I know I kind of jumped the gun and said my piece, but one other thing. Following the reports of the chemical release, Russia and the Syrian military said Israel fired missiles at a major air base in central Syria, killing 14 people, including 3 Iranians. The Pentagon denied in a statement that the U.S. military had launched the missile strikes and would continue to closely watch the situation. Historically, Israel, this is just a tidbit, historically, Israel, anytime they would do any sort of missile strikes or sort of countermeasures is if they believe weapons of mass destruction or some type of weapon agent, whatever variety, is being in transit or is either being hosted somewhere or something like that. So, let's see, what else is there to it? Just everyone's, obviously everyone is pretty pissed off. Trump blamed Obama, said, if he didn't do anything, because he didn't, he drew the line in the sand, Syrians crossed it, and he didn't do anything to drastically, punish them. Sure. The government just said, okay, whatever, let's just do whatever we can because the U.S. isn't going to do anything about it. So, obviously, he said this is horrible, but he was also referencing Obama in terms of his foreign policy there. Okay, let's see. Oh, we also do have a history because apparently this is not the first, second, or third time of chemical weapons in Syria.
No, not even close.
2012, 13, and 14, and then 17, 15. So periodically throughout time, there has been...
It's been a fairly continuous... Well, not literally continuous because there's still a whole, international restriction on this.
Sure.
But yes, it's been a frequent occurrence.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so now that we kind of have the situation of what's going on and what's happening, I think first question I want to tackle is what are your guys' opinions on how we need to intervene or not intervene? Because I think personally, I'll say my piece. Personally, I think we need to step in. We have been shadowed as the world police for so long. We have already done and even at this point, Trump was saying we're going to take the troops out of Syria, but now there are rumors and stuff like that. Now we're going to go back into Syria. So I mean, we've been the world police for so long. I don't think it's wrong of us to... I don't think it would be wrong if we just suddenly say, okay, we're boots on the ground, doing whatever it is to get back into the situation. Because that's my piece. So what about you guys?
Basically, the question boils down to, is a conflict in Syria worth American lives? I mean, that's essentially what we're boiling down. We're taking a risk on American troops and their livelihoods for a conflict in Syria. I guess you can make a comparison to the war in Iraq, where Saddam was doing similar things to his own people.
Sure.
Should we have stepped in there? Should we have not have? Lots of people have different, opinions on that, fluctuating from side to side. I don't know if part of me wants to take the libertarian stance and say this isn't our business, but another part of me recognizes that conflicts in the Middle East tend to involve conflicts here in terms of terrorism measures and different meddlings with other countries in terms of other superpowers such as Russia or China meddling into other people's affairs, just like sometimes we do.
Sure.
So I guess if I were to boil it down, would U.S. troops on the ground and putting an end, because we would put an end to that conflict, assuming the Russians didn't get involved. Mm-hmm. It wouldn't be close. Assuming that, would that keep American lives safer? Would that stop conflict overall? I don't think it would. But there are still innocent people on the ground there that need someone to help them. Now, whether it's American lives, I don't know.
I would say that I don't think this needs to be a scenario where the United States specifically needs to get up in arms and say, we are going to go and, as the saying goes, we're going to go and liberate the hell out of Syria.
Right.
I don't... I don't think this is a situation where that's a good idea for several reasons. Most notably, just the Middle East being the general boiling pot of tension that it has been and will continue to be for the foreseeable future. I don't see a situation where us going in there and actually directly and very, very physically intervening would... I don't think it would cause tensions to go down at all. It would definitely be seen as, like, there. I don't even think it would necessarily be a directly popular decision with the rebel forces there, because this is definitely a situation of a foreign power intervening and, in this case, winning their war for them. Like, yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Finish.
Just to finish that, I feel like some action should certainly be taken, but it should not be done exclusively by the U.S. I know the Security Council likes to prevent things from happening with the United Nations.
I think Trump was calling for the Security Council to do something, just essentially get off your butts.
I think that's probably the best course of action here, is at the very least appointing a joint force of some kind, so it's not just heavy-handed Cold War style American just kind of strong arming of foreign powers.
So don't you think, because I'm looking at a perspective of experience, where we have already gone through essentially a very similar situation in terms of there is foreign problems and there is a bad guy, clearly a bad guy. Clearly there are people that wish us ill will, or not us specifically, but in the general area.
No, Americans, no.
Well, I'm sure I'm sure the Syrian government does wish us ill will. But I think at this point now we have done the trial and error of just strong arming ourselves in, and, then either immediately evacuating or doing something, or reconstruction, or how we interact with, just in this instance, the locals. I think we can definitely use that as a learning experience. And I'm sure there are plenty of people who have analyzed the situation, and there are people who have gone every single which way of what could have happened, what did happen, versus the differences that we could have made. I think we can definitely, if being smart about this, I think we can definitely directly and physically, as Evan said, intervene and not end up with a way bigger mess. So I don't know. Because if
the biggest thing is, I think it would result in a smaller mess in Syria and a larger mess on a global scale.
Okay.
Because barring we all know what an international mess the situation in the Ukraine was a few years ago.
Yes.
This wouldn't exactly be the same thing, because we're not looking to effectively make parts of Syria an American colony, but it's still literally one nation deciding, and not even in a border expansion scenario like Ukraine was. This is one nation deciding, all right, this little place across the pond, we've decided that your government, fair and democratically elected or not, is no longer fit to govern your country, so we're going to come in and play God and rough your shit up.
Right.
And this, while you're correct that this is exactly what we've been doing in the Middle East for the past 25 years, I don't think it's the best way to go about making lasting change in the Middle East. I think it is a good, quick solution. I don't think it is anything even remotely close to a good permanent solution.
Well, then what's the good permanent solution? Because I can't think of one. Or I can think of one, but it's going to be extremely controversial.
All right.
Well, what is it, Blake?
Well, it would require a whole sect of that world, of that region of the world, to go through a reformation.
Oh, okay. So you're essentially you have two enemies that don't see eye to eye
at all.
Yeah, and you'd have to make
one
them
of them wants one country to literally be obliterated off the earth, and all of its patrons and citizens and anybody that connects with that country to be killed, and that in and of itself needs to change before we can even think about generating any other forms of compromise.
You don't think no matter what historical background, trial and error, if we don't tackle this beast first, then there wouldn't we couldn't make any lasting and stable change. I think
it's just going to be a cycle.
Okay,
it's going to be the same cycle that we saw whenever we entered Iraq and Afghanistan, and then we pulled out, and then we had to go back because of the bubble that was created, and ISIS ended up forming up, and then at some point we we drove ISIS back into the mountains, and then once we go back in and we pull out, there's
Same
nobody
thing.
there. It's like it's almost like if I tell you, if you're a kid and I tell you don't touch those cookies,
sure,
and you touch the cookies the first time, I'm gonna take those cookies away. But then I bake more cookies, and then you touch those again.
Right? They're not learning. Yeah, it's the same thing.
And it's not it's not that they're not learning. It's just that
they don't care.
They don't care.
Okay. So do you think what if we were able to get other allied quote unquote allied powers? I just UK,
so if
France,
we got the UK,
whatever,
France,
any other
Canada, and
sure,
Germany to back us
and make what? This. Do you, because I think it's if then in this instance if we're just strong heading this and we're the big bad guys that are reacting to the situation and the no, don't do that. I think if we show a more universal effort, we'd have more resources to control the situation.
Yes, but it's not necessarily a war against America. It's a war against Western culture and Western civilization first. And so we saw that when we had allies backing us in the war in Iraq and Afghanistan, the war on terror, we had UK troops on the ground. We had French. We had Canadian troops on the ground. But it all boiled back down to the U.S.'s major involvement in it, and it's essentially a war against Western civilization and culture. In that part of the world, it's viewed as anti their ideology,
right,
and that that those people need to be killed. And so unless you have a widespread reformation of a certain ideology or certain philosophy, I don't see this changing anytime soon.
No. Okay. And kind of despite you're correct that largely you would want just a united front of some kind, but at the end of the day, none of the European powers, none of the countries in the world really can come close to matching the raw mobility and the raw size of our military.
Not even close.
Oh, true. Yeah, I know we're like what at the top. Take the top 4. We're number 1 or whatever.
Yeah, we're number 1, and then
but like
the
take
top 11 countries.
Yeah, combined is not as much
military spending. Yeah.
Okay.
But having said that, though, you do see a gap where United States is at the forefront of stopping the deadly regimes that we see. You don't see UK at the front of fighting a war or trying to overthrow or trying to help out the people in Venezuela. You don't see that.
Right.
It's usually the United States taking responsibility or at least taking action first in order to help those that we see as innocent civilians or in the right.
Real quick, Cole, you've been kind of quiet. Do you have any comments or anything different that you'd want to add before I ask? I'm about to tangent, but I don't want to leave everybody out. Anything, Cole? I know you're not super into politics and stuff like that, but
it's not that I'm not super into it. I'm just very uneducated with it, so I'm actually just kind of taking it all in what you guys are saying.
Okay.
In regards to the specific Syria thing, I mean, the simplest opinion I could give is if we have the means to help, I think we should, but is the kind of help we should provide going in and fighting someone's battles? I don't know.
Yeah. No, I mean, that makes sense. I just, how we can provide, I mean, either through proxy fighting or support or however it is that the correct route? I'm not entirely sure. But real quick, before we continue on, do you think that the reason why the U.S. has more firepower than the top 11 countries is because it got to a point where other countries were seeing us expand and build and continue our military strength, that they've said, the U.S. has got it? Or is it just because...
No, you definitely see that.
It's literally a matter of resources. The United States is a massive country with all kinds of open space to use for, even if you look specifically at the case of nuclear power. A large part of the reason that we were the ones who finished that whole project first is that we had just a lot of open space in the western United States that we could use for testing these weapons, or in the Pacific Ocean, all the holdings that we were taking from Japan during the war. The biggest advantage that the United States has over other major world powers is the sheer size and just the sheer scale of the resources that it can bring to bear. Just because of all the land it operates on, and because of the relative ease of its populace. Like, we're the most advanced large country.
But is that historically true? So if we look at historically some of the greatest empires of all time, we can look at the Roman Empire, which at the start did not encompass a large set of resources. Of course, it gravitated to that. We can look at the British Empire, which at its start did not have a large set of resources. It had to make its way to that.
So then looking there...
But it has been, and you are correct, but it has been true since... I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh, no, you're good.
But it's been true basically about since World War II, because since that time, the British Commonwealth, the empire that the sun never set on, that was the biggest, on a global scale, that was the biggest threat, I suppose, besides Russia, to our standing as this great superpower. But just because of various sorts of internal strife, they were just losing these holdings. I believe that if you look at the Commonwealth itself, even though they're all independent countries at this point, I'm relatively sure the sun still never sets on the British Empire, but it's much, much closer than it used to be. There's like one small island in the deep Pacific Ocean that's keeping that dream alive.
Well, so you don't even think there's any legitimate, because it's almost like you're in a race and
race started in 1945.
Well, sure, but I'm saying at this point now, do you think there was a point in time where it's like, the top the top 4-5 countries or whatever, they see that we're advancing so much that now they're not because how much are we pouring into our military? A lot of money. How much is the UK at this point? Because obviously they could put more money into it and try and advance more, but I feel like it's getting ever so exponential where it's like, okay, now we're just getting on top of more.
No, at this point it's not. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, you're fine. You can see it with the other countries I wouldn't call it taking advantage of U.S. firepower, but I would definitely call it awareness, and I would call it knowing that Big America has your back. So if Canada, for God forbid, had to maintain all of its huge, vast resources and borders, and it's from, let's say, a Russian invasion through Alaska,
we're there.
To the Canadian might be the first ones to fight it, but they know that they got big bad America right below them, ready to go. And you see that with the UK, France, Germany, all of our allies not Germany, but all of our allies from World War II. You just saw America picking up steam because of the Cold War, and other countries just not having to spend the resources because America became the world police that we are today.
There's also a matter of you are kind of right at what you were getting at earlier, in that at this point there's not a lot of reason to be competing with America on that global military market. So, for example, let's say you're running a car dealership, right? Now, are you going to spend the capital to build your own cars?
Or just import it?
Or are you going to... Well, if you have the money to, are you going to import from another country so you have that selling point? Or are you going to, say, just buy cars from Ford Motor Company and just be a Ford dealership?
Sure.
It's that same idea. Where, at this point, the sheer capacity that we have for designing, developing, manufacturing all this various military tech that we have just so far outstrips most other countries. Again, I'm going to leave a small exception for Israel because they have to, and they still I'm pretty sure they still import quite a bit from us. And then
supply a lot.
But Israel is probably the only exception that I can think of because they're such badasses.
Yeah.
And they have no choice but to constantly defend themselves from people trying to kill them.
Well, Russia as well, and I know North Korea is devoting an absurd amount of their resources to this nuclear program. But at the same time, this is kind of the point that I'm getting at, is that their resources are so meager that even if they do become a nuclear power, they just don't really have a chance to match us.
No, that makes sense. One last thing, because I want to get back to Syria real quick, but I just keep on asking different questions.
at this point, because we are so powerful and we have all of these resources available, is it our responsibility? That did we put ourselves in this situation where now it's like, okay, we do have, just like what Cole said earlier about, we have the means. You know, if Blake, you're driving your giant beautiful car and you're driving down the road and you see like, you know, a couple people and they've got a broken down car and someone looks injured or something like that, is it your responsibility to say, hey, I've got the resources, you know, at least stop to see what's up, or just keep driving and not worry about it?
Right. It's really a philosophical stance at this point.
Sure.
So it's, because you have something, do you have an obligation to help those that don't? And I think in some cases you do. Mm-hmm. I think in some cases where you see genocide, sometimes you have an obligation to step in, like in Somalia in the mid-90s, mm-hmm. where you saw Mohammed Farad Aidid controlling most of Somalia and the capital Mogadishu, and you saw 300,000 people killed from mass starvation. Mm-hmm. The United States, I think, somebody at least had an obligation to step in, and the United States chose to be those people. Mm-hmm. Because I think there is a right and wrong, morally and ethically, and I think it's really not that difficult to tell if you take away, you know, the existential ideologies that sometimes corrupt people. I think it's very easy to tell what is right and wrong. Most cultures abide by what is right and wrong, mm-hmm. and I don't think it's that difficult to see. And so sometimes I think America does have an obligation to step in if we can. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I don't think we do. Like, I don't think we have an obligation to step in if Russia is, you know, if Putin is killing off politicians so that he can be president. We don't have an obligation to step in there, because it's that's really not our business. It's not. And what way is
so
that?
Then where's the line then? Where is it?
I don't know. That's a great fucking question, isn't it?
Evan, do you know where the line is? Cole, do you know where the line is? I don't know where the line is.
It is interesting because that was exactly what people were talking about in World War II. Because America was saying at the time, it's not our obligation, it's not our war, we don't have to help. And then suddenly, we did have to help because it involved us. But before we got in, tons and tons of people were saying, we need to be in this war. We need to be helping. Innocent people are dying.
And with regards to World War II, we, to a very real extent, we fought an economic war far before we fought a military war there.
That's true.
Right. There was a lot of support going to our allies at the time in Europe, and of course we were, at least to some extent, preparing for Japanese invasion. But yeah, World War II is a fairly good example of the same thing happening and how this sort of thing can just escalate. And I think that's a large part of why foreign policy in general for the 70 odd years it's been after that, that it's been so interventionist, is to prevent some great rising up like this from happening again.
Well, I was talking to my boss about what if somebody invaded the U.S., what would happen? Mm-hmm. And I remember we ended up getting into this debate about American interventionism, and he maintains the completely libertarian attitude of we should not do anything with anybody ever. Just to defend our people first, and no, it's not even then.
It's just that's it.
Yeah,
wow.
And to the point where I almost checkmated him into him saying that we shouldn't have intervened in World War II.
Oh, okay.
And he quickly withdrew that statement because of historical reference.
Sure.
But he very closely he believed strongly that the United States should not intervene at all in anything.
Well, because then it's like, you know, is this, and it's so hard to, you know, have the foresight and the, you know, what is it, whatever, something's 2020. What hindsight is 2020. Because it's like, you know, what would happen if, again, let's tie this back to Syria, if this happens and we say, okay, bad, shame on you, no, don't do that, and, you know, even then, I was going to ask if, like, the U.S. should follow up and investigate and, you know, not necessarily directly intervene, but, like, figure out, okay, what happened, who did this, was it the government, and then, you know, provide that information to the whatever UN, however, to handle it. But, you know, then are we just letting a bad guy build up power and then become this horrible figure, or would it be a waste of time?
Well, I don't really think that's what's going on in this conflict. The sort of thing
I think it's always a possibility.
Well, it's certainly you're not wrong that it's a possibility, but the main thing that the Syrian government has been trying to do for the last several years has been to try to hold on to power.
Right.
It's not a war that they're losing, but it's also certainly not a war that they're winning. They're fighting against the popular opinion of their own country.
Sure.
They're not really, besides the growing refugee crisis, they're not really in a situation where they can pose an existential threat to other nations.
Then spin it in terms of just a metaphorical big bad guy. Because then if this government keeps, pushing and pushing and pushing, and we're not definitively either, sabotaging their government, replace it with whatever else, or whatever decision we come to, then, it could be just a similar thing to like Kim Jong-un, where it's like, okay, I've got a super weapon. Now who am I going to blow up? So, obviously I don't think they're anywhere close to having some kind of nuclear capabilities, but there's still thousands and thousands of people that could be hurt, and there's thousands and thousands of people in other countries surrounding Syria that could be affected by something. And I think it's that, and again, link it back to my own personal life. I hate not knowing. The unknown, at least have some kind of game plan, at least have some type of preparation for this response. But should we let it build up to potentially something disastrous? Because then we have which crisis is more dangerous to deal with? Is it the potential bad guys that'll potentially do something stupid and dangerous, or now we have all these refugees and we have all these hurt people, and we have potentially new enemies being made in different countries because we didn't intervene, or who knows? So
let's put ourselves in their shoes for a second. Let's imagine and at the rebel shoes.
Okay, sure.
And let's imagine we're in 1776 United States.
Mm-hmm.
At that time, Britain was the largest superpower in the world. Would we have wanted France to step in and help us when they did? If they had the means and they helped us out and helped us win that war. If a country can, why wouldn't we, as those rebels in Syria, want, if I were a rebel in Syria, I'd be desperately wanting the United States to help us out.
Sure.
And you're not incorrect, but at the same time, that was something
I know
that
France and Britain had their own conflict.
Well, no, it honestly has nothing to do with the France and Britain conflict.
Oh.
It's more so that we, as a result of the Revolutionary War, we were very deeply indebted to France for a fairly long time. Honestly, the reason, or a large part of the reason that we got off as relatively scot-free as we did, is the French Revolution that occurred not too long after, and the massive amount of of money in general that Napoleon needed to rebuild France after that disaster.
Sure.
And so, as a general, that is a risk that some of them may feel that they're running, is being indebted to somebody who is and it's orders of magnitude a greater difference between.
Would it be
the U.S. and France as opposed to the U.S. and Syria?
Yeah, it was more of a philosophical comparison. Which, if you're somebody that is in desperate need and wanting to retain freedom, would you not want that next big superpower to please help us?
Right. I say yes. I have no problem supporting the overthrow of a horrible big meanie.
I just don't think if it's worth American lives. That's because
I'm just curious
talking about.
Yeah,
because I remember we were in criminal law in college, and we had a couple of ex-Army Rangers in my class. We were talking about the same thing. Maybe not, I don't think it was with Syria, but I think it was with another
some
conflict.
Other. Sure.
And I remember two ex-Army Rangers in my class said, "Fuck no."
Oh, it's not. They're not defending their country. They're.
Well, they honestly looked at people that wouldn't do anything to fight back against their oppressive government as, and I'm gonna quote them, as giant pussies.
Okay.
And that we shouldn't have to sacrifice the greatest men and women that we have to fight alongside them if they won't even do what they need to do first. That was their attitude. And these are ex-Army soldiers that saw their buddies get shot. And they don't want to see that again. They don't think it's worth it.
So, yeah. So that brings me back to what I was asking earlier is, if we can help, should we? And what kind of help should that be?
Exactly.
Before I go into this, so I don't sound stupid if I'm incorrect, how long is this Syrian rebels versus the government been going on?
4 or 5 years.
A long time, right?
Yeah, it's definitely been
on the verge of the Obama administration or something at some point. It was during his administration.
Definitely.
I thought of like 2011, 2012 is when 2012 I think. Okay, started.
That's about right.
Yeah.
So it was interesting because I think it was 2012 on this website I used to visit, roosterteeth.com. Used to have a big like forum and blog posting stuff, and there was this guy on there who started posting and saying that this website was one of the only sites that wasn't currently blocked by the government, and he was just daily posting pictures of basically the situation outside. And I think this is when the whole conflict was first getting started, and it was a literal war zone. He was posting pictures of people in the street dying, buildings collapsing, all this kind of stuff, and all he was doing, because he's like, this is an entertainment website, I know nothing's going to happen from me posting here. All I want you guys to do is please at least spread this information, spread that this is happening, so that maybe anyone can help. And I remember not long after that, a bunch of hackers and different people, and like people going under the anonymous group name and whatnot, were helping people on forums, Syrian rebels, learn how to access the internet through different pathways and different things in order to communicate and communicate with both themselves and people outside of Syria, because the government was blocking all that. And so it's like just something as simple as helping them reestablish internet connection and reestablish communication. Is that something we could do?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that's definitely... similarly what Evans was saying about us fighting an economic war in World War II. I mean, why not?
Cyber war?
I mean, not necessarily cyber war, but provide information, provide help, care packages, everything that we can, and then those who, I'm sure that there are plenty of people in the military who are willing to go overseas to help those who are hurt and those refugees and stuff like that. Then sure. My last question though, if you guys have any comments on that one.
No, I'm with you, Cole.
Okay. About this specifically is what do we do about the refugees? Where not necessarily what does the U.S. do about it, but like if you were playing Sims Master and you said, okay, now I have all these people who have nowhere to go, because I would hope that you don't want them to live in the destroyed towns and rubble.
Also give Syria enough time to rebuild, get its infrastructure back and going.
But where do we put the people in the meantime? Because I'm sure that'll take years.
I mean, that's the question, isn't it?
Well, they're going to be with us right now. Western civilization, Western culture. The only thing is, if you're going to come here, and you need to abide by Western civilization and their legal.
You don't think we can do some type of temporary holding and just say, all right, this part of this unused land in Texas will be.
See, but that's the thing is they're not going to the United States. They're going to Europe, and there is no unused land.
Oh, yeah.
There is none. That's why this issue is as large as it is you're having tens of thousands of people flooding into already crowded European countries that they don't struggle to deal with their own population, but they haven't had a massive surge of population growth in a very long time.
They're actually losing population.
Yes. As a general rule, European countries have declining population. And so you're having these just floods of people coming in, and it's just ruining their not ruining their economies directly, because that's just sort of painting it in an overtly harsh light, but it really is just a ton of stress.
It's also putting a lot of stress on European and Western culture in itself. If you look at what was Joe Rogan was talking about this with Gavin McInnes when Gavin McInnes was on his podcast.
Who's Joe Rogan again?
Joe Rogan is just some dude, UFC, whatever,
something about that.
And but Gavin was talking about the rise in crime in most of these Western European countries, and how because Western European countries have let in all these people, but because they come from a harsh background, the government is being less lenient on them in terms of the legal systems and legal parameters that they have to abide by.
I think that's fair.
So I don't think that's fair at all.
Well, because I think I wouldn't say this is a direct.
Go ahead.
No,
sorry.
No. I'm just saying. All I was gonna say was, I think, and again, this isn't a 1-for-1 comparison, but similarly to U.S. law, that if you're under duress and you're forced to do X, Y, and Z,
I don't know the extent, but like, rob or break into a car if someone is forcing you to do it, gun to your head, or beat someone up, gun, whatever it is.
Sure.
You know what I'm saying, Blake? Under duress.
I do, but
we have the exception for special circumstances. So I think if you have a madman, essentially the idea of a madman forcing you out of your country, and this madman being not having a home, potentially starving to death, chemical warfare in this instance, I think it's very fair that now you're being forced out of your home, because I'm sure they didn't say, yeah, let's screw my homeland, screw my heritage, screw everything, let's just go to Europe, because why not? I think
they're there because they're escaping war.
Exactly.
But I understand that.
So I think it's fair to grant them
for you, but I'm not going to allow you to run amok in my country because you escaped war zone. You are here on our good graces, and you're going to act appropriately. You're going to abide by our legal systems, and if you break the law,
then what? You're deported? You're in jail?
Typically you won't be deported, but yes, you would absolutely be punished according to the law that you broke.
That's what I'm saying. Whenever somebody comes to this country, if we're taking it, let's say if we were to take in 15,000 refugees tomorrow, all of those refugees need to be made completely clear before they step foot in this country, or before they get indoctrinated into this country. Here's the law. Here's how you follow them. If you have any questions on the process, here's phone numbers, websites, anything you need. We're going to help you as long as you adopt our legal system and abide by it.
Then how about then what do you think about this? Having a leniency period, not a permanent. Because you're a refugee.
No.
Like for the first few months of you getting appropriated to this new life and the new habitat, essentially. You have a few months of, here...
Oh, I didn't know that this was against the law. My bad.
I mean, well, not to boil it down that simply, but sure. Like, because I'm sure that there are hundreds of laws and sub-articles and subsections that I'm not aware of in the United States.
Yes, but typically you're not... If it's something minor enough that you're, like, that you forget it exists, then you're really most likely not going to be punished for it very severely by the law in the first place. Like, sure, we have all of these bass-ackwards laws that you find in joke books, but at the same time, like...
Well, like
there isn't...
Obviously, you're not going to pat someone on the back, say it's okay, you're new if you killed someone or something like that. But I don't know, and I guess I'd have to see the details and see what laws are being broken or what crime is happening, if it's more violent-oriented crimes and stuff like that. But I do think that there should be some type of leniency period.
So if you were to be forced, let's say the United States had a civil war, it broke out. Let's say the Second Amendment was repealed, and Alabama and Georgia and all of them decided to secede.
Again.
We're having and we're having another civil war, and you decide, fuck this, I'm out of here.
Right.
And you go to Canada. Should you have a leniency period?
Well, in this instance, I don't think so, because that's why I think it's so specialized, because one, we're dealing with people who theoretically don't follow the ideas of the Geneva Convention, where I feel like if the Civil War...
I think the people do, it's the country that doesn't.
Well, right, but I mean, that's the point. So I think if the U.S. broke out in Civil War, I'm not gonna worry about some Joe Blow guy knocking down my door, seeing that I'm not on his side and blowing my brains out. I don't have to worry about that.
You very well might.
I wouldn't think so. I think if we're having a war, I don't think a civil war where it's about guns. I would hope that it's not going to be.
No, but you could very easily have half of your house knocked down, and that's
true.
The sort of thing that, like, it's not like these people.
But it's not an immediate thing, though. I think it's like Texas gets invaded. Sure, I'm out of here.
Yeah. Okay. Fine. Then that's the scenario.
Then I move to Canada. Then yeah. Then I think there should be some type of leniency.
No.
I think so. Maybe not 3 months in this instance, but maybe like a month of just getting readjusted. Okay, I've just essentially
what. So
and you should be given a book or you should be given a legal pad of all of Canada's wonderful anti-free speech laws, and you should know exactly what those are.
Right.
And
so just to be clear, what sorts of scenarios, what sorts of laws being broken are we looking at actually granting a leniency period for here?
Well,
please be specific.
That I've heard, I don't know if this is true or not. This is just what I hear people talking about when they talk about refugees committing crimes and then getting easy whatever punishment or no punishment. The big one I hear people say is rape.
Yep.
That they're coming in, raping people, and then they say, oh, they're stressed, they're whatever. It's a different rule, different treatment of women, so it's okay.
I was thinking...
I don't know if that's true. That's just what I've heard.
It's not putting a Hershey's in your purse and saying, oh, I thought I could pay for this later. It's not that.
Okay. Because I was thinking
now
like
the rape capital of the West.
Well, sure, but like I was thinking more like if like some kind of scuffle broke out or something like that, and it's just a refugee and another refugee or something like that, and then maybe a native gets involved and then he gets hurt. Well, traditionally, you should get slapped with some jail time because that's assault and whatever. But maybe it's an argument, and that's just the culture of wherever this refugee came from. Not specifically saying that's the culture of Syria, but in just regards to.
I think we disagree on cultural relativism then.
Well, okay. Well, I wasn't made aware until just now that rape was the biggest problem. Because then, sure, obviously,
it's largely rape and theft. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, I think theft. I don't necessarily want to argue it now, but I think looking at specifics with theft, what are the cases? Then maybe that.
I mean, if you're not committing like larceny, then the penalty for theft is already a relative slap on the wrist. Like it's true. Yeah. I don't think that's something whose punishment needs to change based on whether you're a refugee or not, because it's already fairly light.
Sure. I don't know then. I guess I'll walk my statement back a little bit if it's in regards to rape, because rape is not okay. It's not good. It's definitely not good.
I'm glad we agree on that.
Yeah, I'm
the start.
Well, dang, we are almost out of time. I was gonna. And I was, as we got into it, I was like, okay, how are we going to incorporate a totally not super serious global problem? So we might have to split that off into a separate segment or something like that. I don't know, but
sure.
But anyways, so I guess really closing remarks then from you guys. What do we do now? What if you were president? What are your next course steps of action to deal with Syria specifically? Not refugee, not whatever.
Well, first order of business, my hair would go white. But anyway. No.
Survived 3 assassination attempts on Tuesday.
No, that's what the Secret Service is for. You don't put that on your agenda.
There you go.
But
yeah, gosh, Blake, jeez, what are you, an idiot? Don't understand how this works.
No. In all seriousness, I think sort of like we were discussing earlier, the best course of action would be economic aid where it's applicable. And I do think that you were onto something earlier with the going and sending in investigators on our end, be they specifically from the United States or unilateral. I mean, we have spies everywhere anyway.
That's very true.
But
the Russians.
Yeah, correct. And so, with regards to that, just I don't think there will be a need for direct military intervention unless there. Well, now I honestly don't even know what specifically could happen, like within the nation of Syria itself, that would tell me immediately we need to go and we need to be a part of this, because I think as long as it stays within that country, I think that it is something that while we can provide aid, I don't think it's something that we need to just come in and end this conflict immediately. I don't think we need to bring the hammer down.
Blake, similar thoughts?
Blake Stalin McCowan, as President of the United States, would immediately increase sanctions on any formal government that is providing a safety net or any militaristic or economic support to Assad's dictatorship and regime.
So we will slap Russia? Because I was going to ask that.
I would, because I think Obama and Trump are both sucking Putin's cock the past 12 years.
Sure.
And so
I don't know about Obama as much, but Trump for sure.
Definitely Obama as much, for sure.
Okay, all right, that's a separate conversation.
I guess it is.
And maybe not directly sucking it, but definitely just standing there while he waves it around.
He's acknowledging it's there.
Interesting. And then if those standing governments did not back down, Blake Adolph McCowan would, as President of the United States, would at least send over a couple. I'd probably send a couple of SEAL teams to do some investigation, and if they needed to, take out high officials within the Assad's government first.
Oh, you would grant them that
Yeah, before we stepped in and put actual, a full-fledged boot and invasion on the ground, I would at least send in special forces in order to examine the situation as closely and as accurately as possible.
And then if that unfortunately goes terribly wrong, we enter Vietnam 2 Electric Boogaloo. But
Cole, any adding additions or subtractions from the dictators over here?
I would just watch the Black Panther movie and see what they said.
Solid answer.
Yeah, here for our world.
So overall consensus, we're sticking our fingers in it, but not our whole boot.
Not until
we see some.
Not until direct action from another foreign power, even if that's increased aid from Russia to the government. Like if the Syrian government starts to lose its hold and they start suddenly receiving aid from foreign powers, then clearly some sort of more serious intervention is required. But
now, do we make the because I think realistically we say anyone who supports Syria, but in this instance I just think we can boil it down to Russia. Do we make it publicly known that we're actively watching Russia and say, hey, Putin?
Damn right.
Yes, okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
It's time because Russia has basically been the rebellious teen with way too white of parents right now, and that they're doing whatever they want, and we're going, Billy, stop that. 1, 2, Billy, that's what we're doing. It's time to grow some balls. We're America, damn it.
Yeah. All right, I can agree with that. Any other closing remarks on this? Gosh darn, almost hour-long segment of what I was only hoping it was going to be 5 minutes.
Make
peace,
peace, not war.
What are you, a hippie?
No, not at all.
Oh, okay.
I think we've gotten some good evidence at this point that Blake is the exact opposite of a hippie.
Damn.
Well,
Damn.
I guess if that's anything you're going to take away,
we should listen to John Lennon's "Imagine" and then go from there.
It'll work out from there.
Buy speakers and put them all in Syria and just have that constantly playing
it.
Oh God!
Imagine other people. No. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for chatting with me about this. I was hoping we were going to talk about a teacher suing pressing charges against an 8-year-old who has autism who hit the person apparently. But no, we're talking about this whole time. But anyways, if you made it this far into the podcast, thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. Love the support and likes and comments and everything like that. I want definitely to start engaging more with everybody. So if you have an opinion about Syria, if you like what we're doing, if you don't like what we're doing, if you think we should do something else, whatever it is, definitely comment down. Love to hear your feedback. Literally anything that you guys, for Evan, Blake, Cole, me, I'll forward it to these guys unless they're actively watching the comments and they want to reply on their own YouTube channels. But whatever, I'm not going to even have one. That is okay. Yeah, definitely. We're here to discuss and talk about it. I think again, honing back all the way to the white privilege video. Nothing can be done unless there's some kind of conversation. So
open the door for debate. Let us know.
Yeah, and
We're doesn't happy to reply.
If it's hateful, great. If it's not, awesome. Whatever it is,
preferably not.
Well,
but,
I would love to send Blake like, hey, guess what Dee said about you about how she hates your guts
you're
now.
A fucking idiot. Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for the comments.
Thanks for the comment, guys. Yeah. You spelled fuck wrong. It's not with a PH.
You're right.
I don't know. I think that's more just a creative spelling of the word. Fuck.
That's true.
And I'm a person who generally despises creative spellings, but I like throwing PHs where they shouldn't be.
There you go. But anyways, that was the end of the One More Podcast. Appreciate it, everybody, and have a great day or night whenever you listen to this. Peace.
Watch Mask of the Phantasm.
Yes. Oh yeah, that's also that's something going to come from. Watch that. And that is the end of the show. I really hope you enjoyed it. Just remember this thing is sponsored by Haven Cottage Event Center, and I am making up the words as I sing this song, but make sure to give them a call or an email if you want to do something that is small or medium. And that's about it. Ba-ba-da-ba-da-ba-ba. This is the end song. It is now over.